Hawk Talk with President VanWagoner.
Well, here with Stan Wilczek, MVCC graduate. Thank you so much for joining me on our Hawk Talk podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Great. So we can start, if you don't mind, just a little bit about where you were born and what it was like for you growing up.
Sure. I was born in Utica. I spent part of my graduated from Whitesboro High School. Mm-hmm. My parents lived in Marcy, and it was out in the country. My grandmother had land, and I gave it to my parents, and we built a house. And so I was kind of, even though I was only 3 miles from the senior high school of Whitesboro, I was out in the country and camping in the backyard and in the summertime, and in the Adirondacks, and had a great kind of suburban type of life.
Yeah, so. Great. And then how did you find your way to MVCC?
Well, when I was in high school, I remember the guidance counselor going to them and, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, well, I love math and science. I hate English and social studies. And they said, we should become an engineer. And so that's kind of what my career path led me. I originally wanted to be a jet pilot. I wanted to be an astronaut would have been my life goal. So becoming an engineer, and at the time I had to put myself through college, and I looked at the different places, and I came here to talk to people about MVCC, and I remember them telling me, you graduate from our engineering program, you can go to any engineering school in the country. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, that sounds good. I can live at home for the first 2 years and be able to get my degree. And so that's what I did. I came to MVCC and
that's great. All these years later, the faculty and staff still use that is still the case with our engineering program.
And it was definitely true. Definitely true.
Fantastic. Yeah. So looking back on your time at MVCC, what was the experience for you?
It was, at the time you don't realize it, but it had an indelible impact on my life. And, the skills that I learned as an engineer, I didn't realize it at the time that how it would affect my life, but problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, those aspects of the engineering career were they were great. I mean, they were fantastic. And again, you don't realize it until you really get out into the workplace and you start doing things. And, I know how to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. I can use the same skills that I had developed.
Yeah. So a particularly memorable story or memory that stands out?
Actually, I'm driving here. I live in Syracuse, outside of Syracuse. So driving here today, there was one, it was very early I think it was within the first week or so in one of the classes. And again, this is probably not apropos of what we do today in academia, but the professor said, look to your right. One of you are not going to be here, next year. Mm-hmm. And I looked to my right, and it was a person I had graduated from high school with, and he had an A average, and I did not have an A average. So I gulp. Fortunately, 6 weeks later, he dropped out of college and went into the Air Force. And I went, okay. So that was one. Another one was just the professors, and in particular, again, trying to think back, Mr. Gall. He would get up there and start his class and, go around the board with chalk. And, when the bell rang, he was done with his last thing, and the board was completely full of notes, and it was like, nothing. He didn't appear to have anything on his desk. This was all out of memory, and it was I can remember some of the lectures. I can remember some of the things that he drew, and trying to put forth a concept in engineering, and that kind of stuck to me when I later on moved into academia and try to emulate that. Coming very prepared to class and being able to do things and answer questions and, fill up the class with as much information that I could portray to my students.
Yeah.
So that was.
And so graduated from MVCC, and where'd you go next?
Well, when I was at MVCC, as I said, I wanted to become an astronaut. I wanted to become a jet pilot. So I remember, I think it was in one of the other buildings, they have. The military comes with their recruitment. And I remember talking to somebody, Marines, and I said, I'd like to be a jet pilot. Oh, we have a perfect program for you. It was called Platoon Leaders Class, similar to ROTC. Mm-hmm. Join us, and you'll spend 2 summers in Quantico, Virginia. When you graduate from college, you'll become a second lieutenant. We'll send you off to be a jet pilot. So I joined December 31st of my freshman year. Went to Syracuse, signed in. in between my freshman and sophomore year at MVCC. I was down in Quantico, Virginia for my first, stint as a Marine. Came back and my eyes started to go bad. I had to start wearing glasses, so I couldn't be a jet pilot anymore. So I originally was going to be an aeronautical engineer and transfer someplace. So I decided to switch to nuclear, and there weren't many schools that had nuclear engineering, but SUNY Buffalo was one of them. They actually they have a reactor on campus, believe it or not. And so I ended up, when I left MVCC, transferred to UB. All my credits transferred. It was as if I had, seamless transfer, the full 2-year credit, and I ended up getting my BS degree in nuclear engineering from SUNY Buffalo.
Fantastic. And then what did you do with the nuclear engineering degree?
Well, that's another story. I got to be a junior at SUNY Buffalo, and I went into my advisor and I said, what does a nuclear engineer do? I'm not going to walk into my first day of work and my boss isn't going to hand me a textbook and say, read the first chapter and do the even problems at the end, which is what I'd been doing for 3 years. And he said, good point. Why don't you try to get a summer job, at a utility that owns a nuclear plant? So he gave me some contacts. There were, 4 utilities in New York State owned or were building nuclear plants. So I sent my resume out. Luck would have it, Niagara Mohawk in Syracuse was looking for a summer student that could work on some nuclear projects. They were looking for a very specific person. So I got a summer job working there. And when I graduated from college, they made me a job offer. Even early in my senior year, I got a job offer from them, come work for them full time.
And so this was probably in the 1970s?
1974. I graduated.
Okay.
We had, Niagara Mohawk had one of the biggest, it was the biggest commercial plant to be built in the United States. They started in 63, going off into nuclear, came online in 69, and it was the first large commercial plant that was built because of economics, not because somebody wanted to test building a nuclear plant.
Yeah.
So 9 Mile Point Unit 1. So it was great because it was early in the industry. We were a large plant, and we came up upon the problems first. As with any new technology. So I was in the forefront of solving things that nobody else even knew how to solve, let alone, us solving them. And so it was a very unique opportunity from that perspective, that I was a young nuclear engineer in a field that didn't have a lot of nuclear engineers. And
what an exciting time. So how long were you able to kind of stay on that path within engineering? Yeah,
it was, I rose up very quickly. I started off as just an engineer. Actually, the week before I started, I was still going to school in Buffalo. I started my MBA program at Syracuse in the evening. So I was, first 5 years, I took me 5 years to get my MBA at night, but I did that. I moved up quickly within the company. I became a lead engineer after a few years, then eventually a manager. And then I wasn't even 40 years old. It was around 19, just before 1990, I got promoted to a vice president position in the company, vice president of nuclear support. And so I moved up very quickly, and I spent about 20 years directly in the nuclear field.
Yeah.
But when I got that job, my boss asked me, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I was prepared with the answer because I had hired a lot of people by that time in the company, and that was always a question that I asked people. And so I said, out of nuclear. And
you had just gotten into nuclear, I was into it, but just promoted.
I was an officer in the company, and well, wait a minute, I just made you an officer, and so I explained, I wanted to find out what was the rest of the company about. I'd been at that time 18 years in nuclear. How did they connect the lights? What happened when the power goes out? All these other questions. They said, all right, you give me 5 good years, and I'll career path you into another area, which in a utility business, that wasn't done back in the 70s and 80s. It was, you were an engineer, you retired an engineer, your gold watch after 35 years. So, but I had some opportunities, and he moved me to another part of the company. The company sent me off to Harvard for a semester in their advanced management program. So I came back and was promoted to a vice president of customer service.
Wow.
Moving from a highly technical field to a touchy-feely people field.
Indeed. Yeah.
But my engineering skills, they were, at first, I think people thought, "What's this nuke coming in here into the customer service organization?" But I used a lot of my engineering skills to problem solve, within that part of the company.
Yeah. And then did you retire from that role, or? And then...
I spent 10 years in the customer service organization, and then we merged with another company, and my job eventually got eliminated. I was put in other positions in the company, and it eventually got eliminated. So I found I was 50 years old. I was financially okay. I had a severance package, and I'd always dreamed about writing a novel.
Okay.
And so I said, here's the perfect opportunity to do it, and I did it. Luckily, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, how to get it published. I put together a business plan on a one piece of paper, write a book, get it published, sell 100,000 copies, go back to the first step again and write the second book.
Oh my goodness. So how many books have you written?
I've written 5 novels. I'm working on my 6th.
Fantastic. Wow. So you really had that point, 50 years old, to reimagine who you were and what you were about. It wasn't just lock into that classic learn, earn, and retire model of modern life.
Yeah, and it actually, there's been a lot of research recently that showed that people after about 20 to 30 years in a career, you start to go down. Your productivity goes down, your creativity goes down, and a lot of people that they've studied that have had successful lives have gone into something different. So I went from nuclear to customer service, and then customer service to, I started writing, but it's a lonely job. I'm home by myself all day, and I was used to interfacing with 100 people, throughout my career. And so I had done some teaching when I was in nuclear. We had an operating agreement with SUNY Oswego, so I taught there, and so I decided let me try to be an adjunct someplace. So I got a job at Lemoyne College, an adjunct instructor in teaching statistics, and then eventually got to a teaching position at Keuka College. So Fantastic. I've been there for about 17 years. So it's kind of like even a third career, writing and teaching.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow, looking back all those years on your MVCC experience, the Whitesboro kid coming through MVCC, what does MVCC mean to you?
It really was again, in retrospect, when you're here and I was working part-time in a grocery store trying to put myself through college, and not realizing the learning that took place. It was happening, but I didn't realize it. I was not an A student. I was a B, C student. But in retrospect, I learned an awful lot, and if I could do it over again, I would have taken probably some different courses. Again, I was an engineer. I didn't know how to write. And public speaking, forget it. I'm an engineer. Give me back then, give me my slide rule, my pencil and paper, and I'll solve a problem for you. But, I would have probably taken a public speaking course, which, back then no way, I'm not taking public speaking. Give me the easiest, liberal arts course I can take. And I just want to take my engineering courses. I would have taken a writing course, but it was, again, it's in retrospect, you remember things and the skills that you picked up, critical thinking, problem solving skills. Those were what you needed in the marketplace to be successful. And that was the framework that I got here through, you read the book and you do the problems, but listening to the instructors and listening to the professors that, they really brought the theory into practice, in the classroom, and not just repeating what was in the book.
Yeah, we often say, start here, go anywhere. And Stan Wilczek, you are a great example of coming through MVCC and having the world open up.
Well, thanks.
Fantastic.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Talk with President VanWagoner.